Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Morrison. I'm the Electoral Area Director for Cowichan Lake South Scots Falls, and I will be chairing the Committee of the Whole meeting, regular meeting of Wednesday, February 22nd. I'd like to first begin by acknowledging that this meeting is taking place in the territories of the Coast Salish people. Acknowledge that to begin with. I'd like to also ask those people that are in the gallery today, if you have electronic devices, that they be put on mute or silent or vibrate. And with that, welcome everyone to our meeting today. We have a somewhat lighter agenda, but let's see what we can do about being swift in getting through this. It's important work we have here to do today. We also have our board meeting this afternoon. So with that, I will turn to Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To begin your meeting, a motion to approve the agenda as circulated, please.
Moved by Director Manhouse, seconded by Director McClinton. Any discussion on the item? Seeing none on screen, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Mr. Robbins.
Under adoption of minutes, a recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 8th, 2023 be adopted.
Can we have a mover or seconder? Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director McClinton. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Item 3.
We're not aware of any business arising from the minutes, which moves you into public input period. Opportunity to the public to comment on an agenda item before this committee.
Just before we acknowledge Mr. Evans, the purpose of the public input period is to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on an agenda item before the committee, before the committee considers the item today. The public input period procedure policy provides for the public input period to proceed in a timely fashion. Public input period items cannot include matters which are or have been the subject of a public hearing. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, on today's agenda is R4, and it is incorporation. And I lived through the incorporation study in 2009, and it really disturbed a lot of people in the community. I think the community needs to know that about the study coming up, or what you propose. $190,000 put out to do a study where they mention areas A, B, and C are going on this trip. Have areas D and E being asked if they want to go on this trip too? Because there is we're in a common watershed, and we have land. Area B has land on both sides of the Kokosala. For a person on the Kokosala in area E or B on the west side to vote, he has to go through area D and C and come to B. So I think that before we think about any incorporation, we need to get our modernized OCP in order. Area B is still operating on its old 985 zoning bylaw, and so we have to have a good look at this, or we should have a good look at it before we even think about going A, B, and C. Mr. Chair, when we go to incorporation, the improvement districts then are usually absorbed by the municipality. we've had improvement districts. For example, the Shawnigan Lake Fire Hall had their letters patent from 1950. They started up in 1950, and the CVRD didn't even start till 1967. These people have put in years of work. The improvement districts are owned by the landowners. The landowners are the only ones that vote on these things, and they put their heart and souls into this for 40 years. So we have to let these people know what's going on or what you propose, and I'm sure $190,000 could surely be used right now to fix up, well, for example, the Malahat Fire Hall, which is a disaster. The improvement district fire halls are in excellent condition with fire ladder trucks that reach 5 stories. The Malahat, run by CVRD, has a 24-foot ladder to hit 5 stories. We need to get the CVRD in order, and we need to get our APCs, and the OCPs and zoning bylaws in order before we even think about this trip. Has the areas A or E and D even been asked if they want to be part of this? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Evans. Would anyone else like to provide input to the committee today?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and distinguished members of the board. My name is Kim Bernard, and I'm a resident of Area B within this South Cowichan area. And I was very surprised to see this on the agenda today. I feel like it was slipped in without any public consultation, and I'm wondering if due process was followed. I understand there are
Excuse me.
people that, sorry.
You really
Can't.
have to be a
Okay.
little more respectful to the staff and the
Thank
people
you.
that have prepared the agenda. So comment on items on the agenda, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my understanding is that there may be people that would question the selection of areas A, B, and C, and if Area B alone has some challenges that would require further study. So I would ask that we would look at this in a more public, informed way. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else in the gallery that would like to provide input to the committee today on items on our agenda? No one online? Our next item then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to Section 5 delegations. With us today, representatives from the Cowichan Historical Society. They're going to provide a background information and overview of the society. You'll recall that they've distributed material to committee members previously.
Welcome. You just turned your mic
Oh,
off.
sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and board members. My name is Carolyn Prelowitz. I'm the current president of the Cowichan Historical Society.
Carolyn, just before, we've got people watching from at home. Could you maybe just move a little bit towards the center of the lectern and move and move the? Yes,
Oh.
you're on TV.
Well, for my chin up, I am. Anyway, my name is Carolyn Prelowitz. Oh, there we go. And I'm here today along with my colleague Priscilla Lowe to give you some background information about our society, which was registered as a nonprofit society in 1974. The purpose of our society is to gather and preserve information and records connected with the history of the Cowichan area, and to maintain and develop a museum for the preservation of objects of historic interest and value. Our society thus owns and operates the Cowichan Valley Museum and Archives. Our museum is located in the former 1912 Duncan train station, and our archives is located on the third floor of Duncan City Hall. Through our sub-rental lease agreement with the city and its lease with Island Corridor Foundation, our society is charged with both the maintenance and the preservation of the federally heritage-designated Duncan train station building. A business plan of our preservation project is in place with our board approval. Funds towards this project have been received from the city, Island Corridor Foundation, 100 Cowichan women, and numerous individual donors. We are hopeful that our current participation for the $50,000 prize money in the Next Great Save competition, sponsored by the National Trust for Canada and Ecclesiastical Insurance, may see us finally able to meet the costs needed to at least update the furnace and the heat pump in the building. That competition, by the way, ends at 11 a.m. this morning for voting. We are in the second year of a 5-year lease with the city for the space in City Hall. This past December, the Society learned that the city will soon be putting out tenders to renovate the City Hall roof. Once renovations begin, rainwater damage to the heritage collection held by our archives could be a major possibility. A suitable place for our archives, at least during the roofing renovations, and within the Society's financial capabilities, must be found. If anyone listening here today is aware of a possible site, please let us know at the conclusion of this presentation. Thank you. While our museum and archives are both situated within the boundaries of the city of Duncan, I must emphasize that our collections are regional, ranging from Maple Bay to the east to Paldy in the west, and from Westholme in the north to Goldstream in the south. Our archives also hold the archival collection of both the Bamberton Mill Bay and Cobble Hill Historical Societies. Prior to COVID-19, 12,000 plus visitors a year were coming into our museum. The drop to 235 visitors in 2020 was a huge hit to our pocketbook. In 2021, there were only 2,034 visitors to the museum. Beginning January 2022, the museum operating hours returned to pre-COVID schedules. And for the first time in our history, temporary exhibits were offered to the community throughout the year. These extra exhibitions saw the attendance to the museum increase to 7,333 in 2022, still well below the pre-COVID level of 12,048. Tourism to the valley has not returned to where it was pre-pandemic, leaving our society still in recovery mode. During the pandemic, our longtime curator continued to work full-time until her resignation in September 2021. Since that date, board members and volunteers have managed to keep both the museum and the archives running and open to visitors from the community and abroad. Currently, the museum has one paid part-time employee on a temporary contract, working to provide programs to local and external public and private school students in the museum, as well as local students in their classrooms. The opportunity to make her position permanent, plus the addition of a permanent part-time business manager, a permanent part-time curator, and a permanent part-time archivist would be a bonus. Funding is the key element in realizing the society dream. In some ways, the pandemic has had one positive effect as far as our society is concerned. It has made us more aware of our deficiencies, and especially our needs to embrace technology. A website can be a powerful marketing tool. Experts say the maximum lifetime of a website is 2 to 3 years. We are now in the process of a major overhaul of our very outdated website, and we hope to unveil the new look to our website sometime this spring. A Cowichan Valley Museum Facebook page was started in 2019 and is still growing. Photos on that Facebook are low-resolution copies from our own archival collection. Many small museums like ours are also moving towards installation of added technologies into their permanent galleries. QR2 coded signage, holograms, and interactive tablets for visitors. All of the above requires expertise, equipment, time, and funding. In May of 2018, the Cowichan Historical Society Board held a day-long retreat, the end result being a strategic plan with goals for regular and reliable financial funding, with financial assistance from all 3 local governments being number 1 on our list. Conservation of the Duncan train station building, and increasing the Society's membership, the latter of which we have done and continue to build on. We recognize that a new strategic plan is needed. Work on that is in the works for this spring. But without annual, regular, reliable funding, it is difficult to both plan and look too far ahead. Currently, our society is reliant on grant applications for its funding. Fixed costs tend to take the bulk of our revenues, leaving us insufficient funds for permanent staff. We would very much like to receive funding from the CVRD and would be very receptive from CVRD board members and/or CVRD staff for guidance as to how this might become a reality. In appearing before you today, we hope that the background information on our society, including our current circumstances, has piqued both your interest and your support. If you have not done so yet, I urge you to visit our museum and our archives to see for yourself our collections and galleries, as well as speak with the volunteers on hand. Both sites are within walking distance of this building. Thank you for your time and allowing us to appear before you today. If you have any questions, I'd be pleased to try and answer them.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Prelwitz. I'll go to Director Stone first. Anyone else?
I just want to say thank you for all your work and your presentation this morning. I just sent the link for 1 hour left, folks, to vote. I have voted a number of times. It looks like you're in the lead, but I'll knock on wood, never count your chickens or your $50,000 before it shows up. Also very supportive of funding discussions, but also recognize that regionally we have sub-regional historical societies with their own financial challenges that are very similar to what you've expressed here. And municipally, I know City of Duncan, North Cowichan, I believe, do provide some financial aid to the museum. In Ladysmith, obviously, we have a service agreement and contribute significant funding to the Ladysmith and District Historical Society. I know in other areas, North Oyster, Shawnigan Lake, there are fairly sort of established historical societies and museums as well. So absolutely supportive in concept. I think that the challenge would be what the participating areas might be if the city and the district in North Cowichan are already funding participants. It definitely wouldn't be a regional function at this table, but perhaps the areas that are served by the Historical Society here in the core might look through their grant and aid or something. But as the regional grant and aid function has been defunded, phased out, there isn't a regional mechanism, and I would argue that it's probably not the right place for it, but perhaps the area directors, when they consider their grants and aid for the areas that are represented by the Cowichan Historical Society, might have something in their grant and aid budgets that they could look at. But I just want to say that in this valley, obviously, there's some really well-known personalities in the heritage and history space. My dad was one of them, who, when he passed away last year, I was really thankful to have outreach from some of the more notable folks in our community. And I just actually received a collection of documents and stuff from my dad's estate on Family Day, which was fascinating, but I will be making those donations to the appropriate historical societies and archives in my dad's name. But just want to thank you for the work, because the stories that are told through our heritage also inform our future and say a lot about the quality of our communities in the valley. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Stone. Director Manhas.
Thank you, Ms. Prelwitz, for your presentation. I know back in 2019, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Paul D. Sikh Temple,
Yes.
and the Historical Society did a great, actually an exhibit at the museum coinciding with that 100th anniversary. The temple in Pauldy was built in 1919. That was the same year my grandfather came to Canada, actually, and settled in Pauldy. That's where I grew up, was in Pauldy. And also, I just want to mention that this year, District of North Cowichan has added you guys as a line item in our budget. So moving forward, you guys will get stable funding from North Cowichan, as we added you guys and the Chemainus Museum also to our line item, with the Chambers of Commerce and the Forest Discovery Center. So,
Well, thank you for that. Is it okay for me to respond? Thank you for that, Mr. Manhas. We were aware that a suggestion had been made to that effect, but we weren't aware that it had become a reality, so thank you. Could I make one comment back to
Please do.
Mr. Stone? I mentioned that our Historical Society was, incorporated in 1974, but actually it has a much earlier history than that goes back to, what year, Priscilla? In the 20s, and it was the Cowichan Historical Society then, with covering, again, the extensive area that I've mentioned in my presentation. And then, I guess for lack of funding, it folded, and it was resurrected back in the early 70s.
Thank you for that. Looking around the room, I don't see any further hands, but I'm wondering if there might be interest in, Director Staples, sorry,
I'm not sure if
go
you're
ahead.
seeing us online,
Please go ahead.
Chair. And I know that I'm having a lot of trouble hearing. I can hear the presenter, but I can't hear any of the board members. And I believe that
The same here,
Councillor
too.
Yeah,
Well, that's problematic.
yeah.
We're adjusting the volume, and then we may.
I can.
assuming-
It's distance. Yeah, it's in the distance.
Bring your microphones closer to you as well. That might help.
How does this sound?
No,
No?
no. But the presenter is working fine. And on that note, if I may speak to the presenter for a moment.
Please proceed,
While
Director
you're
Staples.
sorting out the technical difficulties. Thank you for your presentation. And yes, I know that trying to find a location to store everything while we're doing the needed renovation is something that we've talked about at council too, asking around for spaces. So I trust that between the collective, all of us, we will come up with a location. Our community is really amazing at finding ways to support each other, which leads me to being less than an hour away from incredible community support for the funding. I mean, for a city of 5,000 people, it's obvious that there's a lot of people that don't live within the city limits that recognize the importance of the organization and the building that you're housed in. I think we're over 70. I haven't checked. I did vote an hour ago, but I haven't checked since then. But we're well over 70,000 people now that have taken the time, or 70,000 votes, which I know some of them are repeat people like me that voted every day. But just the sheer number alone just really shows how important not just the building is, but the work that you are doing in the building is. And so Just wanted to not congratulate you yet until, as Director Stone said, but just on really the reflection that shows about the work that you're doing and the history that you carry for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Staples. And just to remind folks that if we are the winner, and we are comfortably ahead at this point, the prize money can only be used for the preservation of the building. It cannot be used for operating costs.
Thank you for that. And I was just going to go to Director Stone, just to sort of sum up, I think we've got two paths we could take. We could perhaps ask staff if they might be able to do a relatively succinct staff report on potential contributors through individual grants and aid for the electoral area directors, or we can perhaps take the information that's been provided, and as individual directors, we can contemplate whether or not a contribution to this organization is possible, and whether or not we do have limits on operational contributions through the grant and aid. But two possible paths. There may be more. Director Stone, you had a suggestion?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's 8 minutes left, and it's 76,225 for the Duncan train station. So if we drag it out a few more minutes, we might know for sure. We'd love to celebrate with you all, so.
So I'm going to suggest, for the purposes of right now, since we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, and I'm also not able to access my agenda, which might be problematic even though I've read it, I'm going to thank our delegation for attending today, and we'll all keep fingers and toes crossed for the next 8 minutes, did you say? And good luck with that, and thank you very much for attending today and presenting the information that you did.
Thank you, and I hope that over the next little while that our paths will cross again in any format, and that we will see you coming into our museum and archives just to check out what is there for yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got to do the turn everything off and turn it back on again to get my agenda back up. We may have some, so let's take till 5 after, maybe 10 minutes after. Director Abbott.
Should we be checking whether the system works, or do we all have to sign in?
We'll let staff do their thing and we'll figure it out. This is just my agenda issue that I'm having. Welcome back, everyone. I employed the turn it off, turn it on technique, and it worked wonderfully. I'm going to, as we get back underway, I'm going to ask those of you that are joining remotely, if you could start to use your raise hand icon at the 3 in from the right at the bottom of your screen. There's 2 of us trying to watch the screen, and we missed on a couple there. So if you could please do that, that would be helpful. Just for those remotely, I think those in the room can wave frantically at me to get my attention. Mr. Robbins, I think we're on number 6, are we not?
6, there is no correspondence. 7, no information for the committee. Moving to reports. R1 is a report from the Parks and Trails Division with regard to park reservations, community special events, and park volunteer program highlights for 2019 to 2022. This is for your information. Mr. Farquhar is here.
Welcome, Mr. Farquhar.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee.
Microphone's not on.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. So I've got a couple of slides to show relative to this report that's also in your agenda package. But this is a report that's providing an overview of the past 4 years dealing with the Parks Reservations Program, our community special events that are hosted in our parks by other organizations, and our Park Volunteer Program over the years 2019 to 2022. And it's quite interesting that as you look at the report, some of the dramatic changes that we saw over the past 4 years with these programs, in particular related to COVID-19 and actions that had to be taken to limit or restrict congregation of the public, whether in our parks, whether through organized events. So we see in the report that in 2019, in particular, we had a number of special events taking place, and these are events run by different organizations and community groups that the CVRD is able to host, both in our community parks in the electoral areas, as well as on the regional parks, including the Cowichan Valley Trail. And in 2020, with the advent of COVID, basically everything was shut down. And that also basically transcended into 2021. But we noted last year there was a dramatic rebound with these special events taking place. And we're very hopeful that in 2023 we're going to see through these organizations that they're able to get back up to speed and see pretty much all the events that were held in previous years, 2019 earlier, and some new events that are coming along as well. The other thing to note is in terms of the volunteer program, similarly, we were able to get out the door in 2019 with a number of special organized events for volunteers within our community parks, but had to dramatically hold back in 2020 and the first part of 2021. But more recently, in 2022, we've been able to organize a number of events, and through meeting with your advisory parks commissions in particular, through the end of last year, we've noted a number of events that the commissions have had some input on, and we're looking to ideally host a number of good volunteer activities across the network of parks through 2023, focus on everything from invasive species removal to enhancement plantings in parks to trail building and other activities related to getting volunteers involved. And with volunteers in particular, what's very notable is that not just the events that are organized by our Parks Volunteer Program, but the special events themselves and what our park spaces provide for organizations to come out. Everything from music in the park that's held in Cobble Hill to major events like the Cobble Hill Fair, running events that take place on our trails and elsewhere. These events couldn't take place, couldn't be organized and engaging volunteers in our communities if it wasn't for the regional district's ability to host these events in parks through the administration, through your Parks and Trails program. And again, it's not just in community parks, it's through the Regional Parks and Trails program. So again, the report provides a nice summary of what's transpired the past 4 years, how we've been able to respond and rebound from COVID-19, from having to close a number of things down, and hopefully we're going to see a dramatic continuation of activities in your parks through this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar, and I've got Director Stone, anyone else on the list, but before I go to you, I just have a quick question. I think there's merit, and thank you for the differentiation. We've got regional and we've got community parks in here, and sub-regional parks. I'm wondering what the appetite of the electoral area directors would be to have a little further in-depth discussion at this at electoral area services. And I believe there's some policy development.
Sorry, Chair, but I can barely hear you.
Sorry, I'll lean in just for those at home. So would the electoral area directors be interested in reviewing both this item and the next one at electoral area services and perhaps have some discussion about some policy that may be reviewed and developed for these particular items? So I'll put that out there, contemplate that for a few moments, and I'll go to Director Stone.
Yeah, I think these two reports are reflective of each other in so many ways. It's the rebound after, sort of in this post-COVID era is pretty dramatic even compared to 2019 in special events booking. And if you look at the COVID-19 period, a lot of people were visiting these parks. And I think maybe if folks have discovered the facilities in a way and appreciated them in a way they hadn't before, and, knowing myself, what was the number one COVID activity? It's what park do we go to today to explore? What trails do we check out? What assets that we haven't been able to see before. And then discovering things like, you know, the value of all the different amenities at Bright Angel Park was one of them. And then you see the number of bookings on the tail end of all of those people out discovering our parks and trails. So it's almost like the two reports mirror each other. There's a huge spike in traffic in our parks and a dip in special events. But then as the traffic dropped down in the parks a little bit, the special events in those same parks seem to take off. So it just, to me, it shows the value of, you know, and we've had this discussion going back around recreation and what really fits in Cowichan. And despite it being maybe a little wet here on our wet coast, folks still really appreciate the mild climate and the amazing parks assets we have. So compliments to your team in the Parks and Trails Division, but also, you know, the vision of the boards preceding us in making sure we establish such a great park system.
Thank you, Director Stone, and I'll resist commenting on what great park staff we have, like I did last time. So, rock stars, remember? Director Wilson, followed by Martman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks, Brian. And basically what he said over there, thanks for the bits and pieces. Regarding what the chair said on the bringing it to the EAD, that has merit as well. And I'm quite happy to bring that back to the EAD to discuss what else, as long as it doesn't mean that we add more funding. Because we're overloaded as it is right now. So by all means, bring it back, leave your pocket bit behind. Thank you.
Is that referral of 1 and 2?
Yes.
I guess we could take that as a referral motion. I've got Director Martman, so we'll consider the motion on the floor duly moved and seconded. Director Martman. Can't hear you.
Should I can, that's mutual now. So, should I hold my thoughts until that motion's dealt with?
Do your thoughts pertain to the motion?
No.
Okay, then hold your thoughts. We'll vote on the motion unless there's any other directors want to chime in on that. Clear what the motion is, referral of 1 and 2 to Electoral Area Services Committee. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Director Martman.
Thank you. And I just, as a sort of a question through this, not even a question, but, well, actually a question or a comment from staff would be appropriate. And I just wanted to thank them for the report. And sometimes reports are what's not in it. And then two things in this report that I don't see. And one of them is around Area H. So I look to populating this report next time with activities in Area H, and with the support of Parks and Trails and our group in Area H. The other thing, though, it may lead to a comment from staff, is around things that actually don't quite make the report because they don't really fall under any particular umbrella. And what I'm referring to is the Community Circles Restorative Justice Society and their work along the Trans-Canada Trail up where it joins out of Ladysmith and into Area H, and the support from the CVRD Department of Parks and Trails. And maybe if staff wanted to just comment briefly on that, I don't know if it's appropriate, but it is an event and it is something that had some outcomes.
I will go to Mr. Farquhar, but that's actually pretty tricky, commenting on things that aren't in the report and getting them on the floor for discussion. So well done, Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but it does relate to the reports because it is about use and activities on the trail. And the Community Circles group was before the previous board about an offer to take on engaging with the various user groups on the section of trail north of Ladysmith that connects to the regional district of Nanaimo. And through their efforts, they managed to reach out to various user group representatives, everything from the hikers to the equestrians, cyclists, and some of those motorized type activity recreation users that aren't on the trail per se, but in the area. And through their efforts, they were able to reaffirm the messaging about the stewardship and respectfulness between user groups. And so through their work and through their input back to the CVRD, we were able to modify our share of the trail signage to add a bit more information. And we were pleased to be able to post these new signs up on that section of the trail, and we'll certainly look to adapt those on other places along the CVT as well. So well done to that group in terms of what they took on as volunteers.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. Director Acton, followed by McGonigal.
I thought maybe I would bring this up, but first I was really surprised to see the usage in Bright Angel Park. It's almost comparable to the trestle. So that to me kind of signals maybe more belongs in a regional park function, if we're going to see that coming forward at some point. And the other question was, I was curious how you get the numbers on the Trans-Canada Trail. Like, where does it measure in the usage?
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, I'll take the second question first. That's the easier one. We have several locations along the trail, primarily its main staging areas. So places like the Kinsale Trestle, out off of Somenos Road, up at North Watts Road, in Chemainus, where we know that the majority of people are either coming onto the trail or exiting the trail. So basically we do a double count. So we count all the numbers and we divide by 2, assuming that either they're leaving the same place that they arrived or they're leaving the trail somewhere else. And I think that gives us an overall good indication of the level of use that's taking place on all the segments of the trail.
Point of order.
What's your point?
Have we moved to R2?
We're talking about both.
Pardon? Excuse me?
We're discussing both.
Oh, okay. I only heard we had R1 on the table. Thank you.
We had a motion that moved them both to refer to electoral area services. So if you have any questions about R2, I will come back to you. Did you want to attempt question 1 from Director Acton?
So in the budget for 2023, there is the proposed update to the Regional Parks and Trails Master Plan, and certainly that will be a process to look at the value of parks within our system and where they reside.
Great answer. Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think this report shows the value of volunteers and enticing opportunities to our outdoor recreation facilities, which are much less financially encumbering than indoor recreation activities. And that was more prevalent during COVID as people were enticed as the recreation facilities were shut down to look for other options. And these options are certainly shown within the numbers of the report. And I thank you very much, Mr. Farquhar.
Director Martman, were you able to hear that clearly?
No, it's if you're any distance from the microphone, it just gets garbled.
So Director McGonigal, would you like to repeat everything that you just said?
I believe Mr. Martman can watch the video.
Good one. I'll go to Director Martman.
Follow up?
I'll go to Director. You can follow up, but you can't rebut. Okay, fair enough. Director Martman and Acton to close.
Okay, I'm really a bit confused, and I'm just out of the room and it's a bit garbled. So bear with me. Did we get a report by staff on R2 yet, or are we waiting for that, or is that? I just saw R1 being discussed, so.
Mr. Farquhar, do you have additional information for R2 that you'd like to present to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The main thing really want to highlight is the overall increase that we've seen the last 4 years across our network of parks in the Cowichan Valley Trail that we track. In particular, from 2019 through 2021, we saw a huge spike, almost 45% increase in use across the network of parks. Part of that was related to, as was mentioned earlier, the restrictions or limitations on where the public could go. So I think in a very positive sense, our public was able to discover more park spaces across the region to get out and enjoy. And we're spending a lot of time out there from a mental and physical health and wellness perspective. Certainly in 2022, the numbers have dropped a little bit, but are still significantly higher than 2019. So I think there's been a sustainment of that use by our community in terms of what they've discovered. And hopefully that transcends into 2023 and beyond, because these are wonderful spaces that the public funds and enjoys across our region. And the more they can get out and use and enjoy them, the better. But it does have implications in terms of the level of service that we can provide as it relates to keeping these park spaces up and running. But it's good news overall.
So Director Martman, would you like to pose further questions on R2, knowing that we actually have an opportunity to have a deeper dive at electoral area services, or can we move on?
I'd just like to have a quick point or a quick question to staff on this, if that's okay.
Please proceed.
And that's just, again, the gap of what's not in the report. And I know Chair might corner me on this one, but it's really, I see that there's data for 2019 for Area H, but nothing beyond 2019. And I just wondering if we're not meeting some threshold, or what is it that Area H needs to do to be part of the data collection?
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, with apologies to Director Martman, it was more of a technical issue with what we had established in terms of counters out at Yellow Point Park. We are endeavoring to resolve those, but knowing that we're proceeding with a management plan for Yellow Point Park, collection of data there, not just in the short term for the management plan, but also longer term to establish, understand trends of use in Area H is also equally important. So please stay tuned for future year's reports where you'll see more reported out on Area H.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar, and I'm sure staff contemplated putting a supplemental in for more traffic counters, and were wise not to, and maybe in a future year. I'd like to see more data in other parks as well. Thank you very much for your reports and presentation. And seeing no other hands, nobody online. Mr. Robbins, our next item, I believe, is R3.
R3 is an information report from the Environmental Services Division with regards to the Cowichan Adapts implementation plan. I believe Mr. Lawrence is here.
Mr. Lawrence, please come up and just remind everyone, it's 11:30 now. Our board meeting starts at 1:30, and I think some people might want to break in between. So lunch is in 30 minutes. So with that, no pressure, Mr. Lawrence. We've got another item after yours that we might be talking about. So please proceed.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, directors. It is an honor to present to you the Climate Change Adaptation Implementation Plan for the Cowichan region. And essentially, this plan recognizes that climate change is this global issue, but it does have regional impacts. And as such, the plan that we'll be talking about includes those local solutions to address those impacts. And so really before we get started, again, my name is Keith Lawrence. I'm in the Environmental Services Division with Ms. Miller and Mr. Jeff Moore. And also want to acknowledge the numerous partners that contributed to the development of this plan, various government agencies and community groups. Before we get started, we would like to offer a few clarifications of key definitions. So in particular, we're talking about adaptation and mitigation. And so what do each of these terms really mean? And so adaptation is about these initiatives to reduce the vulnerability of natural and human systems to climate change effects. Mitigation, on the other hand, is initiatives to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere, which ultimately cause climate change. And so both adaptation and mitigation are important to our overall response and essential for managing climate change risks. Important to note that the adaptation implementation plan does focus primarily on adaptation, but there are co-benefits of actions in each type of strategy. And so, for example, water and energy conservation being one of those where there's benefits for both reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also helping us prepare for climate change effects. And so as we got started with this process of developing a climate adaptation strategy with various partners, this first phase of work involved us developing climate projections. And so from 2015 to 2017, we worked with the Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium to develop climate projections. And essentially, those projections indicated to us that our rainstorms will grow more intense in the years to come. Our summers will get hotter, and our summers will also be drier, and also that fall and winter will become wetter. And those projections were set up to out to 2050 and 2080. They also indicated that we will see fewer frost days going forward. And so that set of climate projections, those regional climate projections that were developed, they formed the first phase of this work to develop a climate adaptation strategy. So this multi-phase process of developing that. And so those climate projections did include 16 key recommendations approved by the board, and they included recommendations to incorporate the projections into master planning processes across the organization, but also into engineering and water security planning standards. Also, key to those recommendations was to conduct vulnerability and risk assessments, natural hazard risk assessments, including floodplain mapping. And so that formed this second phase of work, which began approximately in 2016 and is currently ongoing to this day, and is expected to continue to be ongoing as it supports this understanding of natural hazard risk in the region. And that led to this third phase of work, which is about the core development of the adaptation strategy, and involved a number of partners, community groups, and government agencies providing input to identify actions that can address these impacts. The fourth phase of work really focuses on greenhouse gas mitigation. That's a parallel process, again, separate but parallel. Included the development of key strategic documents, including a 2012 community greenhouse gas and energy security strategy. But also more recently, the development of a 2015 CVRD Strategic Energy Management Plan, but also the works of various municipal partners, so including the municipality of North Cowichan's Climate Action Plan. And so going forward from there, where we are today is really in this phase of implementation, and recognizing all the while that this is an evolving process. As we gather more up-to-date information, we can go forward and refine those understandings of projections and impacts, which leads to a better understanding of risk and perhaps new solutions, actions that need to be taken. And so the adaptation strategy was approved in 2021, and the adaptation implementation plan approved in late 2022. What we bring forward today is a summary of that adaptation implementation plan. And so what do these projections, what do they mean? Essentially, when we developed the strategy, we looked at impacts and solutions across 4 thematic areas. And so, for example, as it relates to our infrastructure, we anticipate that drought and heavier rainfall in years to come will place pressure on our infrastructure, including those key communications, transportation, energy, and utility assets. Under our health and safety, we can expect that extreme heat and drought can have human health impacts, and that flooding and landslide processes can lead to serious emergencies. Recognizing all the while that to be able to adapt, we'll need to prepare and be able to respond more quickly with these extreme weather events that are projected to come. Under our economy, we can expect that these climate impacts will affect the productivity of agriculture and forestry sectors, but also that tourism sectors will be impacted. All the while recognizing that we'll need to be there to support our businesses to be able to adapt, to be able to have those tools and resources there to support. As it relates to our environment, we can expect there to be decreases in water availability during the summer, as well as increases in contaminants into our watersheds and the loss of habitat. And so, again, corresponding to this, there's this need to preserve and enhance local biodiversity and support the resilience of our natural environment. The strategy itself, the climate adaptation strategy, includes a vision that Cowichan Region Climate Adaptation Partners will take a proactive approach to prepare the systems in our region for the impacts of a changing climate. It includes 6 goals. It also includes these 5 themes, so those 4 thematic areas we talked about, in addition to this thematic area of cross-cutting actions, which apply and support all of the actions in those 4 thematic areas. It includes 20 objectives, and the details for those are included in a fold-over placemat included in your inboxes. But also 39 prioritized actions within each of those objectives and theme areas. Those prioritized actions as well as activities are described in more detail in the adaptation implementation plan summary attached to the staff report. Includes some indication of the agencies that are leading those activities, as well as the level of priority of each of those. Some of the key next steps going forward include this establishment of an advisory group of various government agencies and community groups and First Nations partners to be able to go forward and implement the actions in the strategy. And so that is the focus of the current phase of work. And so with that, thank you for the opportunity to present, and happy to respond to any questions that there may be.
Good work, Mr. Lawrence. Got Director Douglas, followed by Wilson.
Yeah, Mr. Lawrence, thanks for the presentation. I just had a question with regards to the relationship between the implementation plan and the climate adaptation and risk management
Director
strategy.
Douglas, can you pull your mic right up
Okay, here.
close so everybody can hear?
How's that? Is that better? All right.
I don't know, Director Martman, is that better?
All right. Yeah, so yeah, again, Mr. Lawrence, thanks for the presentation. A question was just with regards to the relationship between the implementation plan and then the climate change adaptation and risk management strategy that the board.
They're all going. Susie looked away from the microphone and they couldn't hear him again.
Okay.
Got to speak into the microphone.
All right.
Can't hear now at all.
How's that?
No, that's good.
All right.
That's good.
Okay, so a third time. The question for Mr. Lawrence was with regards to the relationship between this implementation plan and the climate change adaptation and risk management strategy that the board adopted in 2022. Thanks.
Thank you to the director through the chair, if I may. So great question. Essentially, the adaptation strategy that was approved in 2021 was this large strategy that included all of the actions and a description of those previous phases of work, the projections and risk assessments that were done. The adaptation and implementation plan takes it a step further and describes the more detailed activities and who will be leading which of those activities going forward. So it goes into a little bit more depth, but it also provides some prioritization of those activities, as well as in the more detailed framework that we have, an understanding of what resources will be required to essentially go forward with those activities. So thank you.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Keith. That's all good stuff and all very laudable goals. But I have I'm slightly confused here because on the one hand, we're saying we got to cut down on GHG CO2, and I'm looking at slide number 3 here. And on the other hand, we've got another department saying we have to increase tourism, which means more cars coming into it and all the rest of it. Are we working together on this, or are we just saying, look, we've got to reduce here, but we're going to increase here? One's almost cancelling out the other. Did you see the point I'm trying to make here? Are you talking to other people about what are we doing about that kind of thing?
Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you, and thank you for the question, and through the chair to the director. If I may, I'll offer again some clarification around the focus of the adaptation plan is around those actions that support our response to climate impacts. But it is important to note that the climate mitigation is also important, and if there is some additional clarity that's needed around the greenhouse gas mitigation component, I may also invite Ms. Miller to provide comments as that relates to the community GHG mitigation strategy, a process that was initiated some years ago, and there's some rich history there, and some activity as well that is its own set of comments and response. So.
Yeah, follow up, please, Mr. Chair. I don't want to elongate things here. I'm quite happy with that, with the answer that I've heard so far. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Director Martman.
Thank you. Get closer to that microphone, Chair, please. Did you say me?
Director Martman.
Thank you. And thanks, staff, for this. There's keen interest in this topic in my community, and I see the communication considerations outlined that there will be, a media release and information on the website. I'm wondering if the communication strategy could be more robust, or was there plans to do more around that? Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, through the chair. Indeed, there is this step of communicating out on the implementation plan. We've been working with the various partners to develop a suite of materials that will help us be able to go through that narrative of we have these impacts that we're understanding that are projected. We have this set of actions. We have activities that are in place that are ongoing to address those impacts. And so one of these key next steps following this discussion here is to go forward and be able to release those materials and not only for our key partners, but also for folks in the public as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I have a question and then I have a comment. So my question is, who are the Intergovernmental Advisory Group?
Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, through the chair to the director. So the Intergovernmental Advisory Group that is in the process of being formed would include various government agencies, in particular our municipal partners, but also Island Health as a key entity working on climate adaptation, but also the various senior government agencies that are key for addressing impacts. But also our First Nations partners. So there is some consideration as well to how we include various community groups in the discussion. It's the subject of climate adaptation is incredibly broad with impacts across our region in so many different ways that the consideration of how to be inclusive, but to also have the ability to have depth of conversation in each of those thematic areas, while also allowing space and a place for them to develop linkages and understanding between how a solution in one thematic area might support a solution in another. And so being able to build that collaborative framework is a key piece of work going forward for us this year. So thank you.
So just for clarity, Director Nicholson, with your comment, I'll go to Mr. Schumacher, who's got his hand up, and then Director McClinton. Go ahead, Director Nicholson.
Oh, okay. So, sorry, you confused me. So, thank you. The collaborative framework is super important. So, I guess what I'm looking at here is CVRD's cut of our adaptation plan. And so I really want to thank you for the framework. I think you've done a lovely and very clear explanation of why this is important. I'm glad you clarified that mostly it doesn't address mitigation, because that seems to be a glaring gap in it, which might be a bit confusing for the community. And I really appreciate that you've laid out for me what is currently being done and is planned to, that we plan to do in the next few years. And so, you know, climate adaptation touches basically on everything that we do. And what we do in response to adapting is going to have a huge impact on the health and safety of our community into the future, and not even the very distant future anymore. So when I look at this document, and really it's a great framework and it's lovely, but it points out to me that there are serious gaps and super disappointing progress. I've been here 8 years, and I really haven't seen us move in an urgent way on the climate front. And I am super worried, and it is the board's responsibility, and we have not stepped up in the last 2 terms to actually think about climate change seriously and what that means to how we do business. And I think that this document spells out where we're at very clearly, and it spells out to me that we are not anywhere near doing what we could do and should be doing in a responsible way. So I'm hoping at our strategic planning session that people take the time to take a really good look at this document, particularly the actions section, and think about whether what it is that we really ought to be striving for. You know, we need to set really high goals on this, and we need to get going on it in a more serious way. But thank you.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. Let me just adjust my list here. And I think we're going to have to make an executive decision to complete this item, break for lunch, come back quickly, try and complete, because we do have a closed session at the end of this as well. So I currently have, I had Director McClinton, but I think he waved me off. Director Douglas, followed by Director Deck, possibly. Oh, no, wait a minute. Mr. Schumacher, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies for the informality. This is actually a
Speak up. Yeah, you're going to have to pull your microphone a lot closer, or your computer a lot
Sorry,
closer.
can you hear me now? Okay. Apologies for the informality. I'm wearing a pink shirt in recognition of Anti-Bullying Day. I just wanted to chime in on Director Martman's question. So through you, Mr. Chair, to just, I have worked with environmental services and contributed to the communications plan that goes along with this. And I just wanted to provide the committee with certainty that it is a really robust plan. It carries through like over multiple years. It is very, very thorough. It is one of the more thorough communications plans, communications and engagement plans that I think the organization has done in my time here. So I just wanted to just reassure the committee that I think they have a really strong footing to move forward on, to carry through on the Cowichan Adapts program. And so kudos to my colleagues in environmental services for putting that together.
Thank you, Mr. Schumacher. Director Douglas.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. Just a quick question and a suggestion as well. The report references the hazards, risk, and vulnerability assessment currently underway. Just wondering if Mr. Lawrence could comment on when you anticipate that'll come to the board.
And for that question, I will ask if Ms. Miller could help respond to that, because there's a lot of work going on in that realm, and if I may invite Ms. Miller to respond.
Sure, that'd be great. And
Please join us, Ms. Miller. I'll come back to you, Rob.
Sorry, just zapped Mr. Lawrence. Thank you. Great question through the chair to you, Mr. Douglas. The The process of developing hazard and vulnerability assessments across the region has been going on for years as we drill down deeper and deeper, and we do a case study, and then we look at its merits and then deploy it regionally to make sure that we've got full thematic information. So we've been bringing that information forward to the board every time we finish one of those studies, rather than subjecting you to a very long wait, particularly when there are life and risk issues. And saving you from a massive omnibus. We had been working towards doing a cumulative analysis looking at watershed-based vulnerability on a property-by-property basis. We now have new staffing and expertise in the in emergency management services, and so we'll be working with them because they're undertaking a regional hazard, risk, and vulnerability assessment, so not just focused on the natural hazards, but including that within the work that they're doing. So I'm not sure when you're hoping to bring that forward, but September of this year, that final report will come forward.
Great, thank you. And just the one suggestion really quick, and I'm sure this is already taking place, but North Cowichan just found out earlier this month that we received a $150,000 grant to conduct our own climate change risk and vulnerability assessment, and just would encourage your team to work with our environmental staff at North Cowichan to make sure that we're collaborating and not duplicating any of the work. And my understanding is that's already taking place, but just wanted to make sure you folks are aware that we just received that grant and that work's going to be underway shortly.
We're very happy for you. We've reached out and we've committed to helping move that forward for you as well.
That's great. Thank you.
It's one thing I know about Ms. Miller's department. She's very good at collaborating when there's funds available. Well done. Director Deck to close.
I'm grateful for the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question about greenhouse gas emissions, and I thank Director Wilson for bringing this subject up. If it's possible, could Ms. Miller address some of the actions that are proposed and being worked on?
Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Great question, and it's a really important side of the equation. The regional district had been doing a great deal of work in partnership with the province in terms of establishing criteria for greenhouse gas emissions calculations, as well as building some of the original models based on building typologies, which North Cowichan used some of those models for their strategy. Since then, we've gone through a number of reorganizations. So the greenhouse gas work is no longer within our function area. So we're just focusing on natural hazards, environmental hazards, whereas the primary focus of the greenhouse gas work would fall under land use services as part of the official community planning process, given that it deals with community development, the built environment, transportation, and until recently, economic development.
Thank you.
Great point, Ms. Miller. For those of you that have been to the OCP meetings and idea fairs, it's been a topic of everyone that I've been at so far. So with that, thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Great presentation report. And with that, I'm going to suggest we recess until 12:30, where we will come back and discuss our four and hopefully get into closed session. So with that, you have 35 minutes.